All right. Good evening to everyone. I guess I forgot to do that. Good evening to everyone. Call the February 4, 2019 City of Mount Vernon Council meeting to order. I'm not aware of any changes to the agenda we have in front of us.
I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, communications. Is there anybody that would like to address the council? Please come forward. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Approval of council minutes from the January 21st council meeting. Approval of liquor license for Scores Bar and Grill.
Move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is ordinance approval. Ordinance 1-21-2019A, amending ordinance 1119-2018A, vacating and selling a portion of a north-south 16-foot alley located adjacent to 824 and 906 Summit Avenue within the city limits of Mount Vernon, Lynn County, Iowa. Chris, anything to add to this?
No, just one small change on the legal description. We went westerly when we should have gone easterly, so. Otherwise, we haven't received any communication from either side.
Chris and I talked about this prior to the meeting. If obviously it's up to the wish of the council, but we would recommend for both of these ordinance to obviously approve the second and then go ahead and proceed to the third and final reading just to remove them off the agenda. I think we've talked at length both of these items, but obviously that's up to you five if so willing to do so.
My only concern with that is this is the second mistake that we found in this one. We had that it was 16 feet and now it's 25 feet, and it was easterly and now it's westerly. So, I mean, I get the idea, but that would be my only concern with speeding through it. Part of the process is having multiple opportunities to
Yep,
catch this sort of stuff.
Entirely up to council. Either way, I'll entertain a motion for at least the second.
I mean, I would move approval of the second reading of ordinance 1-21-2019A, amending ordinance 11-19-2018A, vacating a portion of the north-south 16-foot alley located adjacent to 824 and 906 Summit Avenue.
With the revision?
With the revision,
Easterly.
the easterly, yes.
I'll second it.
Any comments? No comments? Roll call, please, Sue.
Herman.
Yes.
Rauterbush.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yes.
All right, so then we'll move on to ordinance 1-21-2019B, amending Chapter 27 Housing Commission of the Municipal Code of Mount Vernon. Chris? Same thing?
Additional?
Nothing to add?
Nope.
Okay. Anybody have anything? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
I move to approve the ordinance 1-21-2019B.
I'll second.
Any comments? No comments? Roll call, please, Sue.
Rauterbush.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Weisler.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes. On this one, as far as waiving the, proceeding to the third and final reading, would that assist in their scheduling? I'm just thinking if we wait until February, they've got another meeting coming up, something like that.
Normally I would say yes, but since our meeting is February 18th, where the third and final reading would be, their meeting isn't until after that.
Okay, so it wouldn't, all right.
I don't know that it would necessarily change anything for them.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay.
All good then? All right, we'll move on to resolutions for approval. Resolution 2-4-2019A, accepting public improvement installation for the Phase 1 Spring Meadow Heights subdivision. Chris?
Actually, the next two resolutions deal with the same Phase 1 of the subdivision. The first resolution is the city formally accepting these for maintenance and operation. So you have the letter from our engineer, the punch list, then the maintenance bonds that are associated with all of the improvements, all of which seem to be in order, and we would recommend moving forward with accepting these improvements. The second one is just a certificate of completion that needs to be done prior to us passing an ordinance. So our next step will be an ordinance at the next meeting that will start to certify the taxes, allowing this TIF project to start. So you're going to do this with each phase of each subdivision moving forward. Like I said, same with that, all of the statements and improvements, number-wise, check out. Everything was quantified, and they're certifying $235,000, which is in line with what they had estimated or slightly below.
All right. I'll move to approve Resolution 2-4-2019A, accepting public improvement installation for the Phase 1 Spring Meadow Heights subdivision.
Second.
Any comments? No comments? Roll call, please, Sue.
West.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Rose.
Yep.
Brattlebus.
Yes.
Weisler.
Yes.
Next item is Resolution 24-2019B, approving the certificate of completion of public improvements for Phase 1 of the Spring Meadow Heights subdivision. I think Chris already made reference to this one.
So this is
as
part
well.
of TIF.
Yeah, so, the first one is part of any subdivision. We'll have
Right.
to accept those for public improvements. The second one is the certificate of completion that's required by the enacting ordinance of the original TIF agreement.
Gotcha.
So you're going to certify these costs as complete and pass an ordinance. That starts their 10-year clock ticking at that point.
In that case, I would move approval of Resolution 2-4-2019B, approving the certificate of completion of the public improvements for Phase 1 of the Spring Meadow Heights subdivision.
I'll second that. You got that, Sue? Comments? No comments? Roll call, please, Sue.
Weisler.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Brattlebus.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, moving on to old business, discussion and consideration of blower motor control replacement, wastewater treatment facility.
And move that we remove said item from the table.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we are back to the discussion consideration of the blower motor. I think everybody should now be well educated on the blower motor.
So essentially, it's a soft start for the larger motors that are over there. There's 3 of them. One was already improved with another project that we had done within the last 3 years. There's one remaining that we'll probably try and bring forward in next fiscal year after this one. But it's essentially that little white box on the photograph that you provided. So.
What was the cost again, though?
Well, originally, ESCO had been out last year and gave us a cost, they thought around $5,000 to $5,500 a year ago. And now the costs are up to
$6,000.
$6,800.
That's quite the jump. Tariffs?
That's what they'll do, they'll blame it on tariffs.
And it's in line, we did receive another quote, and it was slightly higher than this, so.
Any reason to think we should look at buying a second one if we know we're going to have to replace one, if they're jumping that much in cost?
Normally I would say yes, but there isn't a lot of room in the sewer budget to, unless we had some emergency situations, but.
Let's hope they're not 8,000 by the time next one's needed.
No, I think we would probably take action in July on the next one.
They normally mark up right after the first of the year anyway.
Yeah.
Is there an advantage in letting them know that we're going to do that?
They kind of know they're about the only show in town. There's only 2 or 3 people that supply, so, I mean, we can.
They know we're coming anyway.
Yeah,
They've got a list.
pretty much.
Gotcha.
They do, however, know that we will just replace this one 3 or 4 months ago, so they'd have a good reason or excuse if they were trying to mark it up.
Yeah. Yeah, be a little foolish.
So refresh my memory, Chris, is what we're approving based on the whole amount being in addition to the budget or just the difference?
This
It's
was
the
not a
whole
plan.
amount, isn't it?
Yeah,
Okay.
the $6,800 was not a planned expense in the
Okay.
budget. We had originally thought that we might try and put this in with the rest of the improvements at the wastewater treatment facility. However, the SRF is a reimbursement type program, so the less you take, the less you have to pay back, meaning it would make little sense for us to try and stick this $6,800 or $12,000 into that project, pay the additional cost because it's a federally subsidized program, and then take on that debt when we wouldn't necessarily need to. So if we split these up between 2 fiscal years, we actually will save a small bit of money in the long run.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the expense for the blower motor control replacement at the wastewater treatment facility.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is consideration of claims list. You should have a copy in front of you.
Make a motion to approve the claims list as presented for February 4th, 2019.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is discussion consideration of amended 28E agreement for inspection services with the Lynn County Planning and Zoning Department. Chris?
I've been working with the Lynn County Planning and Building Department for the last couple of months now. After we adopted the original 28E, part of the conversation was to make sure that there wasn't a lot of back and forth going on for our citizens. They either went to one location or the other. We were charging a $35 administrative fee when people were coming to City Hall, and then kind of the back and forth communication going to Lynn County that covered our expense. We were collecting about $3,000 or $4,000 a year, so it didn't actually contribute that much to the budget. As we've gotten into this, knowing full well that we have new houses coming online, we have a connection fee of $500 a piece for sewer and water. That obviously is a much bigger deal for us. But again, not wanting to have builders go back and forth, we asked Lynn County to collect those fees for us, which they've agreed to do as long as they can capture what we were charging for the $35 as an administrative fee on their end. Again, we're only forfeiting maybe $3,000 on our end, so it's not necessarily a huge deal. But we need to amend the language that's in here. Les Beck and his staff are here tonight if you have any questions. If you don't, on the 2080, you were handed some updated information on permits, and I would at least allow them to give an update on how 2018 is looking.
Good evening. Les Beck with Lynn County Planning and Development. Thanks, Chris. Also, Andy Hendricks is our office manager, and Luke Maloney is our building official. Thank you, Chris, for that overview. I think he's captured really the essence of the proposed amendments. You have, I believe in your packets was a copy that showed the amendments with strike-through or underlined language, so you can see exactly what those proposed amendments were. I would like to point out a couple of other minor clarifications that I included in the copy I gave to Chris, just to try to clarify a couple of issues. So on page 3, I've inserted clarifying language in there that in those cases where we're charging the zoning, the city's zoning and sidewalk and utility hookup fees, we would only consider that one transaction and not 3. So I've added some clarifying language in that. And then on page 5, subsection 12.3, there's language about partial refunds of fees if the 2080 agreement is terminated. I added language that we're talking about the county's permit fees, not the city's zoning, sidewalk, or utility hookup fees. So I've just added some clarifying language on that. So again, if you have any questions on the amendments, we'd be happy to answer them.
Chris, I assume you're in support of those two changes?
Yes.
No, I mean, I think this makes perfect sense.
Yep.
To your point, not having people running back and forth. This stuff can be a big enough pain in the neck, one way or the other, you know? So we appreciate you guys being willing to.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Anybody have any questions? Thank you all very much.
Thank you. And then if you're, I don't know if you want to take action on it first, but Luke put some permit numbers. We're just going to do a really quick overview of 2018
sure.
numbers, just so you know what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yep.
That would be
Yep.
helpful.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I know you didn't get a lot of chance to review this, but in summary, the city of Mount Vernon has a lot of larger commercial projects going on with the school additions and the wellness center, there's a dental office, excuse me, and some smaller commercial upgrades. We just kind of wanted to get in front of you and just kind of show you some numbers from last year. Our intent is to pretty much maybe biannually get in front of the council, just kind of put some numbers to the, in front of you and show you what we've done so far. As you can see, there's a pretty large uptick in commercial valuations this year. So, again, I think that really reinforces the need for qualified inspectors and building code.
A question on that, though. The commercial, most of that evaluation is non-taxable. I mean, it's school, it's the Cornell. So when you look at that Cornell, you look at that commercial addition new, the biggest chunk of that is absolutely no taxation for this city.
Right.
It's mainly for permitting purposes and stuff like that is what you do it for.
Yeah, that's correct. I guess I was speaking more to the scope of the project.
Right. Yeah. But some people will look at that and go, oh my, no, we're not getting anything out of that. So just so you know.
Yep. No, I think that's a good clarification, Eric.
It is interesting seeing it plotted on the map, the distribution.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Pretty evenly distributed throughout, for those changes. Just ironic.
Yep. Yeah, even with two new housing
Right.
developments being spread out, that'll help too.
Yeah.
This is really interesting information. It'd be interesting to keep this for future years and past years. Just get some longitudinal history about this. But even with some of the exceptions like Eric mentioned, but this is valuable information.
Yeah.
Well, we're proud to serve this community.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions or anything?
How many inspectors you guys have now?
Currently, we have 2. We just closed an open position, so we are seeking to hire a 3rd again.
Okay.
That's pretty much the numbers we'll stick with for now. So.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Excellent. All right, so with that said, entertain a motion for the amended 2080 agreement.
I would make that motion.
I would second the motion.
The laziest.
All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion and consideration of change order 1, Lester Bursch Family Community Wellness Center project. Chris?
Council, you actually have already approved this change order. I'm more or less submitting this change order as an actual record because it has the sheets, basic information that goes along with the change order. So they actually have quantities now that go along with the change order. And the change order did decrease from the $22,880 that we had originally approved. So change order 1 should be reflected in the record as $19,270.27. You don't have to take action on it. I just want to make sure that it's part of an agenda and part of the minutes that we formally recognize the difference in change order 1. So we keep track of these as we move forward.
So no motion needed?
Nope.
And I'm glad you put it back in front of us. It's good
Yep.
to see that.
Yeah, I think I've been down this road with the building after it was all said and done. So it's very important that we keep track of all of this, and it's all part of the public record, and make sure, especially for warranty, so on and so forth, after it opens.
Yeah. Okay, good. Next item, discussion and consideration of change order number 2, Lester Burrish Family Community Wellness Center project. Chris?
This change order is in the amount of $9,358.13, which is under the $10,000 that the mayor could technically approve, but since there was no rush on it, this is changed to door hardware. So when we initiated this building, not knowing when where the bids were going to come out, we made sure that we wired all of the doors to take door strikes in the future, not knowing if we will want them all door strikes. Because we're going 24/7, some of the doors we want to close at a specified time, i.e. the locker rooms. So there are going to be 2 family bathrooms that will stay open to the public throughout the entire process. Locker rooms go closed at a certain date. Plus we added the turf room and then the workout room up above. So it's a little bit easier to give, by going this route, Matt can actually open these doors from his phone.
And that's what I was going to ask. This
Yes.
isn't, nobody has to walk around with a key at 10 o'clock at night.
So you will
Well,
have
could,
a key
but-
fob.
Okay, yeah.
As an individual, you'll have a key
Right.
fob. Most of the time, these rooms are not going to, your fob is not going to work
Mm-hmm.
on these individual spaces. But talking through the security aspect of all of this, we felt it was important to be open 24/7 for adults. However, it has individual spaces that become a concern for the police department as far as people hiding, or safety of the individuals using the facility. So trying to strike a balance. The bids came in obviously where they were. So in preparation for the security, they're actually ordering the door frames as we speak. So
Yeah, I think this is money well
So
invested.
the original doors had wiring to them, correct?
it's the conduit.
Just a conduit.
This is the conduit.
Because, again, I've gone through this before. Like I said, I've been in commercial. Now, these doors normally run, if I was to go out and buy them myself, $1,500 to $2,000 a piece. That's if it's a standard slab door.
Right.
Well, this upgrade is $1,400 per door. And I know, like I said, whenever you make a change order, when you do a contract, it's normally a 20 to 25% markup by the Garling or whoever the heck's doing it. When they do a change order, that jumps to 40 plus. So we're getting hammered for this because $1,400 a door for upgrading just for wiring, that's
And we're
That's steep.
We're looking at each one of these change orders individually as we go through this. So again, we had originally just talked about locking these doors, which requires then staff to go manual lock these doors every night, whereas we're trying to, again, reduce staff costs and keep maybe one person behind the desk at any one given time. At 10 o'clock when we transition from open to the public to open to, adults to come in there, we won't be staffed. It'll just be monitored from the police department, and then I will have the ability, but most likely Matt and his assistant.
Yeah, and that's all understandable. But like I'm saying here, $1,400 a door is extreme.
Yeah, obviously, our goal here is to reduce the amount of change orders, and we talked about that when we first started. If we bring a change order in front of you, it has to do strictly with ease of maintenance or ease of staffing. So we've gone through, we've reduced camera locations by 2, kind of offsets some of the costs that we're talking about
Right.
here. So.
But when you reduce, you don't get as much back as when you
No,
they
the nice
hammer
part
you
about the
when they get it,
cameras is
so.
we haven't bid that part yet, so when I say reduce, we actually won't have about $10,000 worth of expense because we took 2 cameras off. They run about $5,000 a piece.
Yeah. All right.
That will actually be coming to you here in the next couple months.
Well, I think as evidenced by the first change order that actually came in less than, I'd rather see a circumstance where you're showing us worst-case scenario up front, you know.
I don't think that's not worst case, though. They've actually quoted you the extra amount, didn't they?
Yeah, this will be the cost.
this is the
This will
exact
be the
cost.
exact
Yep.
cost of this. And again, yeah, so the first change order came because of a geotechnic issue. The second is because we feel like, well, it'll give us a better ability, obviously, to reduce staffing. And we knew this going in when we first started this, but of course, we were bidding right kind of close to where we thought we were going to be. So we didn't reduce cost in a lot of places, but this is one where, like I said, we ran conduit in the block, so we wouldn't have to do that in the future, but no wire was actually getting extended and key fobs going in. So this cost probably could have been a lot worse had we not even done that.
I had the foresight.
But, no, and I think moving forward, you know, my staff at least recognizes that's what's going on. So again, you're going to have some security packages that have to be bid that will come with it. That's the cameras and the actual operating system with the key fobs themselves. While we're on that subject, we had talked about doing what we had done here in City Hall. This is a bit more proprietary, so we're trying not to do that at this location. Proprietary usually means more money in the future, should we have to replace certain equipment. So that will become, and we expect that to be in the neighborhood of $100,000 or less for all of that equipment. You have then the workout equipment and the other odds and ends that will go in the building, and I expect that to be, not to hold me to this, somewhere in the $150,000 to $200,000 range. So we know of about $300,000 worth more expenses that are coming our way, and we were $600,000 below bid, plus a contingency of another $378,000, I believe. So almost $1 million to the good when we started this project. So we're still plenty there. And again, I will assure you that each change order, the one thing I will say about OPN almost to nausea is the amount of paperwork that they require Garland to go through. If you would like, or ever happen to be in City Hall, I will take you to Submittal Exchange, and this is where everything goes, and you can see all of the reviews, all the PDFs, all the submittals, what's being tracked, all the pictures that are being taken daily. So
I think this one just makes sense, so
Yeah.
entertain a motion.
I move approval of the, let's see, what do we want to do?
Change order
number
two.
There we go.
I'll
Second.
Oh, Steph.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion consideration of pay application number 2, Lester Burris Family Community Wellness Center.
So I gave you this pay application tonight. It's for $225,456.28. I received confirmation from OPN today that they have signed off on this change order. I don't know if you had a chance to go out there today, but they were actually out digging again today. I didn't even realize it, but they had put blankets down over the entire site, which
Somebody was out
reduces
there Friday, I think.
Huh?
I think somebody was out there Friday doing something.
Yeah, well, they were actually shoveling the snow off the blankets so that the warming would melt the rest of the snow. Their plan is they have dug and poured the footings on the south side, and they will move now to partially the east side, but they are going to finish the east side, move to the north, and then follow that building. The masons will come in sometime within the next 2 weeks and start actually constructing the mason part of the wall on the east side first, and then work their way around. So that allows them to keep on schedule while the hollow core deck is under construction, and then the precast panels for the gymnasium. Also, they get the roof on is the goal.
So I take it in their bid, they put in the extra for because at these temperatures, you have to put additives into the concrete and everything to make
Yes.
sure it cures
I
properly.
will say this, since you brought that up, and I had thought about saying, or wanted to talk about this at some point tonight. Every job has certain delays built into the schedule. However, I would expect a potential changeover in the next 2 to 3 months, depending on how the rest of the spring comes, of at least 10 days to account for the absolute cold, because they pulled people off the site for those.
No additive will go down that
Yeah.
temperature.
So expect, and I've talked to Garland. Garland did submit a change order. I told them that I wasn't ready to entertain it until we got through the spring, because I wasn't going to give them 10 days now, 10 days in the spring. I mean, it just ends up pushing the contract back further and further. But it doesn't necessarily cost us. It's for making sure that they don't get penalized at the end if they're 10 days.
Gives them an extension.
Yeah. So I would expect, like I said, the 10 days is fair. They asked for some additional days for the overdig from the geotechnic. We disagree substantially on the number of days that they would like, but I'm winning that battle. So,
And the nice thing is we can reach out to the school district and see if they're receiving the same asks or wants as well, from their project. There's been some cases where not everything, I think, is lining up as well, so. With that said, I'll entertain a motion for pay application number 2.
I would so move.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion consideration of setting a public hearing date for February 20, 2019 to consider Budget Amendment 1 for fiscal year 19.
so this is will be our first budget amendment of the year. This is usually our big one. This one will be actually bigger than it has been in the past 2 or 3 years. Part of that is because we expected certain projects like the Wellness Center and the UV disinfection to start at earlier times when we were budgeting for this fiscal year. Of course, they did not, which means we did not get all of the revenue that we were necessarily expecting, nor did we have the expense that we were expecting. So we need to amend based upon that. What's triggering it right now, as opposed to later in the fiscal year, is the fact that we have the fire truck purchase, and we want to amend the budget before we make that purchase. So we'll set a public hearing tonight. This will actually be on the agenda for the 20th. I wanted to get this in front of you because there's a lot of numbers, obviously, here, and our amendments aren't usually quite this involved. With your report, I will explain which each one of these is. I did not for the set date tonight, but
I'd move, we set the, are we good there?
Yep.
Okay. Move, we set the public hearing date for the next council meeting, February 20th, for the budget amendment, first budget amendment for fiscal year 2018-2019.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion and consideration of setting a public hearing date for March 4th, 2019 to consider the City of Mount Vernon fiscal year 2019-2020 proposed budget. Chris?
so this is a set public hearing date for March 4th. We have to certify our budget by March 15th. Once we print the sheet that was attached with my brief explanation, we can go down, but we cannot go up. With that being said, pretty vanilla. It's $12.99 again. There's some fluctuation that I think that we probably could look at this year, but it could potentially be right back up there next year. So I don't really like seeing this because it's difficult for people to kind of keep track. So just kind of kept it even at the $12.99. When I give my budget presentation, people will likely see or feel like they saw an increase in the tax because the rollback went back up. So it's not our tax levy and hasn't been for the last, let's say, 20 years. But the rollback does fluctuate up and down. So
Where are we? I know in the past, our 1299 has been pretty in the middle,
It'll be about the same.
locally.
I think when I talked to Lisbon, and I probably shouldn't say this on record, but I think they might be slightly, they've gone down a couple of years, they might be slightly back up this year. Historically, I've watched other communities go back up. Some have come down below us, usually when they have a large project that comes off the books, but consistently we've been kind of in the middle for communities our size.
And to your point, it's been 1299 for, I can't even imagine how long. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been consistent. So.
Yep.
Okay. In that case, I would move, we set the public hearing for certification sheet for the coming budget for March 4th, 2019, 6:30 PM, City Council meeting.
One second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion consideration of traffic light improvements at the intersection of Highway 1 and First Street. Chris?
So for those that haven't called yet, yes, we know the traffic lights are blinking. The power surge or the power outage that occurred last week actually prompted our controllers in the lights to basically go out. They were not new controllers, they were actually used controllers from the previous lights that were already there. At this point in time, I talked to Nick today. What we're trying to do is coordinate so that both lights in town would be the same manufacturer and same type, so that we typically call Marion to come over and service our lights in the past because they're much cheaper than calling a company to come out of Des Moines or somewhere else. So we want to potentially spend maybe a little extra if Marion can service that equipment, simply because it's cheaper in the long run when they come out and service it. But I'm expecting this to be around $20,000 when it's all said and done between the cabinet and the controllers. The cabinet that's actually there needs to be replaced as well. The controllers are about $10,000 themselves, and the cabinet is potentially up to another $10,000 because the current one sits on the ground. That's why it's gone bad. We want to try and give ourselves some space so snow can go underneath and not corrode the bottom of the cabinet while we're doing this as well. But unfortunately, unless we spend another few hundred to $1,000 to come out and have somebody try and spend a great deal of time making the current controllers work until we get this done, we're going to get them ordered tonight, or at least get the engineer to get them ordered tonight. Hopefully this week they'll be in operation. But that's about the best explanation I can give you. They just didn't come back, and Nick tried to reset them multiple times. We've had 2 people come out and try and reset them multiple times since the power outage, so whatever happened basically fried that system.
Is there any way to piggyback off of the fifth controllers? The fifth and first controllers? Is there any way to?
Not unless they're connected or wired.
What?
Not unless they're wired. So they would have to be.
We'd actually have to hardwire from.
Yeah,
fifth
they're
up
hardwired
to.
No, what I'm saying is, since we're buying from them,
From an economic
you
standpoint.
might be able to get
Oh.
this controller at a better price since we buy them both together or something like that.
We're attempting to work with a contractor right now. We could. I'm just forewarning you that it could be up to 20.
Well, like
it could be less.
you
Yeah,
could get
we're
maybe a
working with
deal,
a contractor
you know.
that has that light, so
Uh-huh.
that we make sure that we're putting in both.
Right.
And we might. I can't guarantee.
Because you'd hope that those two would be compatible anyway, because they could service the.
They wouldn't have been, honestly, until this happened.
Well, but now we can make them
Yes, now,
compatible.
and that's
That's what I'm
we're doing
saying.
right now is we are working with Price, who has the bid for the Fifth Avenue First Street lights, to try and get the same units.
And I think part of the holdup is the controller that Marion currently has installed throughout their town is not what we had originally quoted. So the contractor's probably going to take advantage of us asking for a different type of controller. However, in the long run, if we need parts or pieces, knowing Marion has every controller in town the same as what we would install, then down the road, we should be able to save just parts-wise, pieces-wise. We can say, hey, we think this went out, and they can bring a truck down, hopefully. In the past, they've serviced the Highway 1 light. In Marion, I'm pretty sure they donated that controller and light to us back in the day, and they've eliminated that whole controller from their fleet. So they couldn't even send guys out to work on that. We had to call the people who installed the light, and they didn't. No one has a manual on that controller, so no one really knows how to. Like the people we called downloaded a manual for it, but it's still fried beyond. So they believe that just the memory's out of it. So when it lost power, it's just gone. You can't reprogram it. So.
And the only
That's
reason,
kind of the holdup, Eric, is we're trying to get the same stuff that Marion has instead of what was originally quoted with our project. So
Right.
we're kind of working it backwards. In hindsight, should have probably thought of that at the get-go with the Fifth Avenue and First Street projects. So I'll take some of that blame.
and the only reason we were utilizing these older units was to save money at the time that we replaced the lights uptown,
Yeah, the
right?
Highway 1 project,
Correct.
and
They were still operational, but we knew they were old.
right, and we, at that time, maybe should have thought about spending the extra 10 to 20 grand to have that updated.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
There are
Yes.
other priorities.
Do these new
that-
systems
there's
have some type of surge protection systems in them now that obviously this one didn't?
Well, and this one did, but the batteries in it, they're saying you can't replace the batteries, and the batteries probably are no longer holding whatever charge they're supposed to. Because we've had power outages before where they go to flashing and they come right back on. So it has something to do with the controller's memory box, and I don't have enough training on traffic lights.
So we
Strictly
did
'cause
turn
we-
them off and turn them back on, though, right?
We tried the OM.
Did a hard reset?
We tried the OM.
All right, well, in that case,
Ah,
we're at the
shoot.
end of my troubleshooting.
We did. As a matter of fact, not only did we do that,
That
but
was just for you, Eric.
the gentleman from
Nick's like,
Marion that actually worked on this unit, who retired from Marion, did actually come up and look at it as
Yeah.
well. And that's more or less how we got to this point. We knew we were not going to get them back on when he said that he could not figure it out.
He said that it's beyond what he can do.
Well, and especially with the existing relationship with Marion and, unifying Fifth and First and
Yeah.
First and the
Yeah.
highway, we might as well.
It wouldn't make sense to have two different
Yeah.
programs.
So with this kind of upgrade or this change of controller, are the walking lights going to be operational as they should have been to begin with?
You know what? That's a valid question. I think we can with a new controller, we can program that how we would like. So what you're saying is when the traffic switches, you would prefer that the crosswalk also switches? But I know right now you have to push the button
Yeah.
in order for it to.
And it doesn't even work on the one side of the
Right.
street at all. So,
Yeah.
That's good, yeah.
And, yeah, hopefully we can address that.
yeah, I mean, I've seen numerous pedestrians really struggle with their ability to cross our street because our
Yeah.
lights are a little
They sit there and wait
irrational.
for it, and it doesn't switch, and they're going,
Yes.
what happened?
Right. It's irrational.
That in itself is what
So-
it
Yeah. And just a reminder, you don't stop on a blinking yellow.
Yeah, that keeps happening.
And you do slow down.
Yeah, just not to a complete stop. Right, Chief?
I was just going to say,
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, entertain a motion. What are you looking for a motion, Chris?
Yeah.
Are you looking for an up to amount, or are you looking
Basically, at this point, not to exceed 20,000. I think if for some reason it should, then
Come
I would
back.
send out an email and let everybody know right away that it did. But I'm hopeful that it shouldn't be in excess of 20 grand.
So may I ask one more question before we do the motion? This would be part then of the budget amendment that we would address in the next
Probably be
council
part of
session.
the second budget amendment that
Okay.
we will. So we will amend again, most likely either in the end of May or first part of June. It's usually our last one, so I'm going to say I doubt it until we have actual cost but it's possible.
I move approval of the replacement of the First Highway 1 and First Street traffic controller with cost not to exceed $20,000.
Second.
Go ahead.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is possible budget CIP communication, presentation from the ambulance service. Jacob is with us tonight.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Jacob?
Good.
Gonna get this set up quick and then we'll go ahead and get going. Yeah. So my name is Jake Lindauer. I'm the new director with the Lisbon Mount Vernon Ambulance. Do I need to talk on that for the video?
Probably wouldn't hurt for at least introductions and get us going here.
All right, so my name is Jake Lindauer with the Lisbon Mount Vernon Ambulance. I took over in the director position this October after working for 2 months part-time for the ambulance. They approached me and wanted me for some reason, not sure why yet, but I'm sure Doug could attest to it.
You didn't run.
What's that?
You didn't run.
So apparently we're setting the bar high.
We're glad you're here.
Yes, we are.
I'm glad to be here. So it's a lot like my hometown of Manchester, which is only 45, 50 minutes north, depending on how fast you drive. Probably shouldn't say that around him.
He makes it in 35, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we are coming to you with a little bit more of a request this year, and it's kind of broken up into 2 parts. I don't know how much information Chris has given you as far as the request so far. Did you give a little bit? How about any of the paperwork, the request paperwork or budgets? All right, so one thing I am going to pass out to you is kind of a capital improvement plan for us, which is something that's been absent with the service the past few years, and what is really kind of driving this request. So we'll get into the presentation, talk a little bit about the service, where we're at, where we see us going, kind of things like that. So we are an ambulance service. We're strictly 911 only. We cover both the city of Lisbon and Mount Vernon through a joint venture as a nonprofit ambulance. We serve a population that's probably significantly more than 6,000 right now. We don't really have good numbers to back that up. And we offer paramedic level service about, I believe it's 92% of the time. It's in the PowerPoint as we go further. This last year, we answered 569 dispatches. Our 1-month analysis of 2019 was a little bit lower, but still has us on track for about 550 to 560 dispatches. And that's anything from 911 calls, standbys, paramedic tiers, things like that. So our mission is obviously to provide community-oriented medical services to both of our communities, with a vision to be a true leader for our area, especially rural EMS here, to provide professional, compassionate care to those we serve. A little bit of our history. So we do have 501c3 paperwork filed. It's probably sitting on somebody's desk waiting to get processed, although I think the government's back running, so maybe that'll be a benefit to us. And we answer to, or I ultimately answer to a board of directors, and they're kind of the ones that help guide where we're going with stakeholders from both communities. Doug Shannon is our board president, and we're happy to have him most days. And so here's the organizational chart. Ultimately, we answer to the cities via your stakeholders. So the people that you put on the board as your representative are truly the voice for your community. And that comes down to me, who kind of helps drive and position the service where we want to go based off of the community's guidance. Does anybody have questions so far? I want this to be as interactive as possible. If you guys have questions, please ask. As far as service members go, our medical director is Dr. Anthony Carter, who was a Cornell student, and is a physician at St. Luke's. So these are our numbers as of 1/7. So we do actually have a second RN. He just passed his boards. We're at 6 paramedics that cover the true ALS calls, 8 EMTs, which is an intermediate between the basic level and the paramedic level, as well as some EMTs and non-certified people. What I do want to show you, and I think is interesting, is where our volunteers are from. 42% are from Mount Vernon, with 9 being, or 35% being from out of town. So these are people that are coming from Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Martell, that are coming to stay at our station and provide a service to the communities here for basically nothing. They do receive a small stipend that comes out to be $1 an hour on call with $10 per call. But to come here, sit and play Xbox for 12 hours, it's not a bad deal, is it? So here's some statistics for us. So like I said, 569 dispatches last year, which is an increase of 25%. I don't think 25% is going to be a constant. I think we are going to continue to increase just with the growth of the communities. Lisbon Rehab Center, Hallmark, I've talked to both of their coordinators, neither one are at full capacity, as well as assisted living and just kind of the small town aspect of retired folks moving here who tend to have chronic health needs that call the ambulance. So
Is that, I'm sorry, is that what you would, I mean, because those are big light leaps,
yes,
right, across the board.
they are.
Or would most of those, or like, what do you attribute that to? It's not like health just went downhill
Yeah.
in 1 year.
So a big factor that we did see after looking back at our numbers or addresses where we're going is the Lisbon Rehab Center. So that's going to bring Lisbon's share of the ambulance up as far as their ownership and their expectations. We are also just seeing generally increased calls from, all of the communities. We're seeing paramedic tiers, which are a great source of revenue for us, where we provide a service or assist another outlying service such as Mechanicsville, Clarence, Stanwood, by giving them a paramedic, and that means that's guaranteed revenue for us. Some of these other calls, we might see $130 on a $900 bill. We're also seeing more standby events, so we're more active in the community. We're out at these community events, Heritage Days, Sauerkraut Days, football games, and those do factor into our volume. And again, those are going to be instances where we're not compensated for being out and about, even though we are utilizing resources. As you can see, so it's 85%, so it's a little lower than I had thought, is how many calls we have with the paramedic. Now with me being here and us having a little bit more paramedic availability, and looking back at my numbers, I would venture to say that's probably 95%, with 97% of our calls having an ALS provider, so that's an advanced EMT or up. So they're the ones who can do IVs, give medications, and really make you comfortable and do some of those life-saving interventions. So here's some more of our activity as far as where we were going to calls at. The Clarence, Mechanicsville, Stanwood, Loudon, those are going to be paramedic tiers as well as mutual aids. So that would be a contract where we provide a service and they're expected to provide it back if our crews are busy or something of that nature. We get into a situation where we need more ambulances than we have. Does anybody have any questions on those numbers?
So explain to me, the Lisbon number there is 35%. That's 35% of the total.
Of the total volume.
And you just talked earlier about the jump, the huge jump in Lisbon. How is that number reflected in that?
So when we look at, currently when we're looking at our budgeting, we're looking at population. And those numbers are obviously outdated with the new census coming in 2020, I believe. We're looking to see what that looks like. However, traditionally, call volumes have lined up very well with population. So this is of the total calls. I do have notes in here. I believe it's closer to it's 67.5% between the two cities as far as the Mount Vernon share. So if you look at just the calls within the two cities, the rest of them would fall to the rural district. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay. So you can kind of see when our busy times are. A lot of people like to call between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. on Thursday. So. And then our volunteer commitment. This is the true savings to the community. And if any of you have read The Sun lately, there was a Did You Know article posted in there talking about the true savings as far as looking at if we would staff a truck with a paramedic and an EMT, which is pretty typical in our area. When you look at area ambulance staffing or Anamosa Ambulance, Monticello, and the savings that our volunteers provide while running typically with 3 providers is pretty significant. So you can kind of see our past funding. So Mount Vernon has been at $13,500, or about $3 per capita for the last 3 years. Lisbon's been at $6,500, or about $3 per capita for the last 2, with $3,500 in 2016. So. In our budget, or our expenses going out, the majority of it is staffing. So that would be my position as well as the volunteer stipends, and then our part-time help. Does anybody have any questions regarding this? So in our budget currently, we don't have anything set aside for capital improvement. And this is our billing. So 2017, we billed out $294,000, and we received $150,000 total from that. And that's going to be from Medicare, Medicaid billing rates. So what we bill is not necessarily what we get paid. And this is the big breakup. So when asked, a lot of people would say, well, we bill for our services, we should be able to be self-sustaining. We should be able to set a price where we can bill for that, recover it, and be able to function. That would be great if Medicare and Medicaid paid what we requested. We'd actually be able to bring our rates down. As you can see, about 60% of our patients are Medicare and Medicaid, and on the left you can see the rates. So on a ALS 1 charge, of which we bill $700, that's an IV medication, cardiac monitoring. That's a pretty typical call for us. We bill the $700, and for Medicare we're going to get $416.56, and if we have to go with Medicaid, it'll be $127.
Wow.
So, a pretty significant loss, and we can't go after and bill the patient after that. That's what we take to recover. So with private insurance, it's a little different. Usually their payouts are a little better, and then we can bill the patient for the rest of that, work out payment plans, et cetera, and recover a little bit more. The other thing that kind of hurts us is we're a rural ambulance in an urban setting. Medicare has different rates depending on where we're at. So if we would be across the county line in Cedar County, we would get slightly higher reimbursement. Our mileage would be at about $11.55 versus $7.55. And that's just different factors playing into where we're sitting. So, because we're considered the Cedar Rapids Metro,
Wow.
even though we're a very rural area.
That's ridiculous. That's crazy.
Do you guys have any questions?
When does the good news come, Jacob?
Yeah.
I didn't make him come here because he had good news.
One day. So this talks about our financial planning. So as you can see with the capital improvement budget, we have a lot of equipment. A lot of that equipment was funded by grants. Our Lucas 3 chest compression devices are funded by the Mission Lifeline grant. That actually comes out of South Dakota, and it hits the counties neighboring South Dakota the year after they release it in that state based off of the trust fund. So every service in the state was able to get a Lucas chest compression device, which does CPR for us, freeing up our hands, which is great for a rural service. It means that we can do more, even if we don't have, all of the help. We don't necessarily have an engine and a ladder truck show up at every ambulance call with us. Most of the time, we're lucky enough to get Mount Vernon Fire or Lisbon Fire or one of the other communities that we respond with. And the problem with that is grants love to buy new equipment. They don't necessarily like to replace it. And that's where we run into the issue with planning for future replacement. The other issue is we are not a 501c3 currently, which disqualifies us for a lot of grants, such as the FEMA grants, Firehouse Subs, which has been very successful with some of the agencies in this region. Mechanicsville Ambulance got a cardiac monitor, so about a $30,000 to $45,000 charge from Firehouse Subs 2 or 3 years ago. So we're looking forward to getting the 501c3 designation for what that opens up for us in grants.
So isn't it true that you could act as if you were a 501c3 even without receiving the formal paperwork?
So right now, once we get that designation, it'll be backdated to when we sent in the application. However, without being sure we got it, it's hard to move forward with applying for grants when you don't know if you're truly going to receive that designation. The other thing we can do is there's some grants, such as the St. Luke's Foundation and the Lynn County grant, that allow us to utilize a sponsor, essentially, so we could request that one of the cities sponsor us to move forward with applying for this grant, because we do provide a service to you guys. And that's the same thing that we're looking at in a way to cut down funding. We'll keep cut down the cost of the ambulance while keeping some expense within the community, as we're currently working with Lynch Ford on ways we could purchase a chassis with them to keep the money in the Mount Vernon area and hopefully reduce cost a little bit. So that brings me to the budget request. So we're asking for a per capita increase. So this is to go for the long-term planning, capital improvement planning of $1 to $4 per capita. So that would bring your guys' yearly givings up to $18,000. The other part of this is we're requesting a share of the ambulance be funded by the cities. That's again broken up by population, which closely aligns with the request for service. And so that would be $33,750 paid for 2 years. So.
And currently, we're at $3 per capita, correct?
Correct. The expectation is that we would potentially see the dollar increase this year. And what I've discussed with Lisbon is increasing by 50 cents over a 5-year period. So $1 this year and 50 cents for the next 4 per capita to get them to a point. So here's the issue that I really think comes into play with it. Are these all of them?
What's that?
Is this all of them?
You can go ahead and talk
Okay.
with this.
So ambulance service is not considered a essential service by law. So we're not necessarily required to in the schemes of the state for some reason. However, in the thoughts and minds of everybody that lives in Mount Vernon, I think most people are surprised by the fact that this isn't necessarily required. So we will have options, or we would have options, and you know, there's a lot of things that have kind of come into play. The initial staffing, Jacob's job when it was first initiated was underestimated by no fault of anybody that's on board currently, but just some things that have happened. But realistically, the costs haven't kept up with what the service is actually providing. I will tell you that I have had Sue put the $18,000 in the budget this year, and so far, you know, things are looking fine. The ambulance we could do. It's not necessarily in the budget this year. I'm still waiting to hear from Lisbon if they are on board with both. So knowing that the dollar increase is in the budget, so we could go ahead and make that payment next fiscal year, obviously we would want that to be across the board before we would pay the additional amount, but it's at least budgeted and it's in there. I have talked to Doug about this before. We can make, a 2-year commitment on the ambulance work, but I won't necessarily bring that in front of you unless I know Lisbon's on board as well. So I wouldn't stick, almost $68,000 worth of Mount Vernon taxes into it if I didn't know Lisbon was coming up with their end as well. Now, the one thing that I would say is, because of some of the things that have occurred in the past and the way that the billing currently operates, we know, and Doug and I have talked about this plenty over the past 2 years, we know that we were going to have to increase our help to the ambulance service in order to keep it where it's at today. I think they've made some changes, so they've gone to an outside billing department. One thing that I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, but if Medicare or Medicaid kicks back your submittal, they'll actually penalize you. So even those are like best case scenarios that they're going to get. But if they find anything wrong with your paperwork, they'll try and take more off so they don't have to pay you, even less. So they've moved to a billing service, which I think was a great move on their part. We do need to commit more than $13,500 to a service that's obviously very much needed and I think expected in the community. But it's different in that the library is required. I mean, we're required to kind of fund that, and we're not with the ambulance again. So I think from our perspective, I would definitely let you know, like I said, the $18,000 that's in there. I'm holding off to see whether or not our neighboring community is willing to do the same on the ambulance as well. This isn't going to go away. They only have a certain amount of dollars sitting in the bank right now. An ambulance will take over 50% of that in one fell swoop. So I do expect us to participate, whether or not it's next fiscal year or we give it to them all in one shot in the second fiscal year, remains to be seen. But we can't, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, I don't think they can sustain taking a $200,000 hit, and still maintain operations without coming back and asking us for more significant dollars on an annual basis. So it's either we get involved with the capital project purchases, and I will say in Jacob's short amount of time, this is the most statistics and paperwork that I've received during a budget process. So I'm happy that I do believe it's going in the right direction, but those dollars are going to have to get replaced one way or the other. It's either us paying $18,000 or paying a significantly greater number for our per capita. The linchpin in all this, obviously, is always we're dealing with two communities here, so two councils have got to kind of agree to these changes. But
That's where I'm worried, quite honestly, because we've run into this in the past.
We can only control what we can control.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I think we're
it's
gonna
not
go
gonna
ahead
change
and-
our problem.
I know.
'Cause unfortunately, they've been
that will
less
be,
than
I think
willing.
the only issue is that I make that distinction not because I've heard that Lisbon isn't going to do their half. It's always, there are two communities, two councils that will have to make that decision. And at some point, I will be back in front of you, and either both communities have agreed to do the same thing, or one community, or you're going to be forced to make a decision on the fact that, do you want to follow through with our end, even though the other community may or may not. I'm not saying that Lisbon has given any indication that they're not. It's just it's unusual to have two communities like this sharing a service. So you will be having to probably potentially discuss that at some point in the future. But again, it won't, as I've talked to Doug, if this money isn't in next fiscal year, it's not as if they don't have money to go out and get the ambulance today, and that money could essentially be backfilled. But they cannot sustain taking a $2,000 hit this year, and then when it comes time to purchase that other ambulance, take another $200. I mean, they'll be without money, and they're going to be back here and go, "What do you want to do?" And then our option is maintain the service, contract with area. I don't think that our community would handle that option well, or, like I said, become more involved. And 2 years ago, I probably would have questioned whether or not I wanted you to continue down this path. I'm very happy in the short amount of time of things that I've seen. So, again, we were able to make that happen. I will say this, and I don't want to pit two together, but you received an indication from the library about next year as well. Depending on what rollback does, I'm not sure I got room for both years, but I wanted to at least give both of them an opportunity to get in front of you and have that conversation, allow you to answer questions. But I did at least discuss with Lisbon kind of a 5-year plan of increases. So it's not exactly, I don't think, what Jacob wants, but it would be a start anyway on the per capita. So $1 this year, 50 cents each for the next 4 years.
Have you had this conversation with Lisbon yet, Jacob?
Yeah, so I was with Lisbon 2 weeks ago. There's a lot of good discussion. Their board was very interactive with me, asking good questions, and really trying to get down to where we're going. So Chris mentioned that we're using a third-party billing company. Looking back at recovery per call, as well as just our general recovery percentage, we're at 47%, which is an increase. We saw about a $20 increase per call in recovery as well. And again, that falls back to our Medicare and Medicaid population as far as why we're only at 47%. That's pretty standard for communities around us. I had the opportunity to talk to a service that I was with in Wisconsin, and they're sitting right around 48% using the same company. So that's something to look at. We're also looking at running leaner. We're really taking a look at our big expenditures throughout the year and seeing what we can narrow down. Inventory alone, the cuts that we've found that we can make as far as going from equipment that we don't necessarily need name brand of. That's just a piece of rubber that we can buy. Instead of spending $3 per unit, we can spend 80 cents. So we're looking at cuts like that, as well as practicing just-in-time ordering. So moving away from ordering large quantities that then expire to keeping inventory fresh, which is practiced in the hospital setting.
Which ultimately, all that stuff's great, but that still doesn't, that's not going to solve.
Reach this.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're tracking.
But it makes making decisions like this a lot more palatable, knowing that it's being responsibly
We're definitely looking at
monitored on the other end. Yep.
and run a little leaner.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, but
Well-
yeah, it's,
And the other factor in this, and having talked to an ambulance director from another community, one of the issues they're facing as well is the challenges with recruiting volunteers.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's real. And, that's not included in these numbers. And it's another factor that I just know that you guys struggle with.
Well, and that's where actually Mount Vernon and Lisbon are both in a very good situation. We can utilize people from Cedar Rapids and Iowa City, those students or those residents who don't have the opportunity to volunteer with an EMS agency in those communities. They can come here and get that. It's just a matter of providing those amenities that they expect. A little bit different of a setting, but Middleton, Wisconsin has basically a 24/7 fire department that's completely staffed by volunteers. And they've used that savings to then pour more funding into their building and their facilities to make people want to volunteer there. And now we don't have that kind of revenue because Middleton's right on the outside of Madison. They have a higher population, higher taxing rates, et cetera. But it's something that we can look at doing, and what can we offer to volunteers to come here? And our volunteer council does a really good job with that as far as fundraising for things like that, as well as keeping people engaged. So,
So based off these numbers, Lisbon's roughly 12,000, right? Would be roughly 12?
so Lisbon is 16.5%, so that's going to end up being, in the grand scheme of things, about 33%. And Mount Vernon is 33.5% of the funding. So that's where we're going to be kind of looking at.
So their per capita's,
So
So
over that, the 33,750 is over 2 years.
right.
So that's going to be.
But what's
30
the-
But no, it'd be 12,000 per, the per capita would be roughly two-thirds of what we are
Yeah.
on both those.
So they're
22,000 and-
per capita, so
Right.
2,500 times
Right,
3, give
so-
or take, and then plus
And
another.
like I said, last year, they asked 6,500 and they gave 3. Is that correct?
No, last year we got 6,500.
Okay, it was the
So
previous
that was-
year.
That was 3 years ago.
Okay, so they did give 6,500 last
So
year.
they're at their freedom.
I still don't understand why I'm still trying to figure out
I
why
think a lot of it is just.
they dropped that 3,500 that year. I was just like,
That's what has me nervous.
yeah, that does happen.
I think a lot of it came back to just the information that Jake has presented in here is the misunderstanding or the lack of knowledge about how
Yep.
the ambulance is operating. Not understanding, hey, we have all these calls, you should be sustainable. I've heard that over and over and over again. And when you get in, when I walked into the board and looking at everything that we were seeing and seeing the costs and how things are working, was a big aha for me, is recognizing that the funding that's coming in is not what's costing the patient and what's costing us to run the service. And so we've really been tasked and working with Jake and trying to get these numbers in front of you so everybody has the right understanding and everybody is educated about what's going on, what the true costs of the service are, what the true benefit of the volunteers are, because our volunteers, as you saw, is huge. And I will tell you that the energy from our volunteers at the service is very high. When I've been down there, they are very concerned about moving away from a non-volunteer type of service. They're very threatened by that. That speaks to their commitment and their dedication as well. As you and I've experienced out here, Mount Vernon expects the Lisbon Mount Vernon ambulance service to be at the call. They don't want another agency to be here. They take the pride in that as well as we do, and that was an issue when I got on the board. There was numerous times where we were asking Anamosa or asking area ambulance, hey, can you cover our calls today because we don't have a crew? That was a common, not necessarily common, but it was more common than I was comfortable with where we're at. And I think right now, I don't know when the last time we've had anything like that, not since Jake's been here for sure, but that has definitely changed as well. So there's a lot of good movement right now. I just, there's a lot of dynamics that go with it as well. So.
Yeah. And I know when we went through the interview process with Jacob, we were quite clear in terms of this is what we're looking for, because we've gone probably forever without it in terms of it actually being treated like a true business. So kudos for you, Jacob, for that. Unfortunately, we don't like what you brought to us, but it's we knew it was coming.
Yeah.
So
And there is an invitation. If any of you want to come down and see our equipment, see the facilities, please reach out to me. I can get you my contact information. So I love to talk about EMS. I actually get to go to Des Moines on Wednesday and participate in EMS on the Hill, where we're going to talk about EMS as an essential service, as well as some other factors related to us. So it should be a good day, hopefully.
Sounds like the practices that you're bringing in are very valuable for the few months that you've been here. And having data, being able to make this data-driven decisions based on some real numbers and real supportive information. And I'm not sure I want to be associated with a council that doesn't want to support public safety too. There's this is not going to be fly well with the public if we don't support what the public's expectation is for safety. So.
Well, and to give you a historical context, when we first moved to town, moved from Minneapolis, I was 8 years old. My mom is sitting at a t-ball game and got bragged to by another well-known woman in town that we had an ambulance. It was the hearse for the local funeral home. And that was, so we've come a long way, is my point. So it's fun to be able to support it and see that we actually have ambulances, not hearses picking us up, so.
And I think that we need to think about doing the right thing for our community regardless.
I do too. I just wanted to make you
I mean, I'm
fully
glad you're-
aware that you could be faced with that potential. You may not. I'm hoping that obviously
No,
you
I'm-
wouldn't be, but I think going back to the conversation earlier, we can control what we can control, and that's what we're going to do. But I think this is kind of something that's been in the background for the last couple of years. All the information that Jacob provided tonight is finally what I think we've been waiting for, is just somebody putting it all together, telling us, the true state of the system that's down there. And it's inevitable that Mount Vernon-Lisbon, given the population of the combined units, that we made a transition to a full-time paramedic. Believe it or not, we have a lot of people that obviously come to Mount Vernon throughout the day. We've had incidences since I've been here the last 3 years that are unfortunate. Not the ambulance's fault by any means, but things happen, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. And people's expectation, I'm sure, as they are mine, are that the ambulance would be there in 7-8 minutes by the time somebody were to respond, and that 7 or 8 minutes seems like an eternity as it is. So I would agree with you. I think me putting out the whole area ambulance is not necessarily to scare anybody, but it's always an alternative. I just don't think it's an alternative that any one of us would want to walk out and declare.
That word essential is so ironic to me, because
Exactly.
I understand what the state says, but I think if you were to ask our citizens, they would...
Yeah, the unfortunate part, though, I think the really thing that, the reason I say that kind of hamstrings us a little bit is we just don't necessarily have to tax for it. It's not, by them not calling any essential service, they're able to kick that 810 levy down the road because, it's one less department that has to be funded out of there. And so I know they're trying, they're lobbying hard at the state level to get that. But
Last year, it was almost passed. They had taken it to the Ways and Means Committee, and that's kind of where it flopped. So the state's really looking at how to fund this without putting more pressure on municipalities, townships, et cetera. They're looking at a tax added on to OWI tickets, things like that, kind of go into EMS. And so hopefully this year, now that they've seen what we want and what we need, they can come up with something a little better, a little stronger to get through.
Yeah, let's hope. If this isn't already available, Chris, let's throw this on our website and wherever else we can to get this out to public.
Were we able to get the link for it? We've been trying to get some things on our website and getting it to link up. So
So I did talk to Meredith, so we have the link on the website. I can send you these slides, or at least this information if you'd like.
that'd be perfect, because what we'll probably do is put it with the budget presentation that you'll have on March 4th.
Yep.
It'll just be side by side, if people can click on there as well.
Get a little blurb with the sun, and wherever we can get some coverage is good. Well, thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Chief, thank you as well. All right. Anything else from this, Chris?
No, I think we brought up the tax rate remaining the same. There's some fluctuation, and I discussed that at the last meeting of budgets, but it's minor. At the end of the day, the only thing, again, as I repeated at the last meeting, is sewer and water rates. That ordinance will likely have to be extended. So.
All right. Anything from a report standpoint? Nothing from the mayor? Anything council committee? Anybody have anything to share? No, Chris?
Just remember, February 20th, Wednesday, is our next meeting. The League of Women's Voters probably picked the worst 2 weeks of the year, unbeknownst to them.
Yeah.
So they're going to try and reschedule sometime in March. I do not have a date as of yet. We'll let you know as soon as I do. Our local staff insurance committee met for the first time last week, and we're looking to have group services come over and talk about some things. But as I stated at the renewal, that United Health is now a player again, and so we're going to plan to spend this year looking at that and other ways to try and reduce our costs to the citizens, kind of in a proactive approach on our behalf. And so hopefully we'll be bringing some things to you out of that. And then wanted to point out we did have our first oops moment with the Nixle. It was interesting because our phone, as soon as it went out, our phone started ringing off the hook, and it was just Sue and I think, that were here, and we're just like, what is going on? So we have various groups within Nixle, and we'll have many more. Each of the administrators have a different privilege on what they can send out, but we had just uploaded the largest of their groups, which goes out to our emergency services area. Our snow ordinance went into effect. That went out to that large group and hit everybody's landline that still has them. So it looked like they had a lot of missed calls from the city. So we answered those. We were still answering a few as of last week, but for the most part, everybody's been pretty understanding. So we will.
Well, it was a legit snow emergency, right?
It was. It just
aired on the right side.
Like to keep it in the city limits.
Yeah. It just got to a few other people beyond.
Growing pains.
Picky.
How many Nixle subscribers do you have now?
We were over, I believe, 110 at the last check before we uploaded some of this information. So we had 110 that signed up.
Did you get my email regarding the city site? It feels to me like there's something missing from that description, because it says go to, text.
Oh, yes. So Meredith is working with, her name is Ray from Nixle, just to clarify that language.
Okay. It just felt
Because
like...
you don't have to technically, you go to that if you want to opt out, essentially. You don't have to text it. You can do it right there if you want. So we'll clarify that.
Okay. I think that will help. I just felt like the communication didn't feel like, usually you get a direction that says text opt-in or text yes
Reply
to
yes.
this, and then it gives, and this one it just said text 8844 or whatever the number was, and it didn't say what to text. And it just kind of left it open. So I kind of guessed, and I said opt-in, and it said something like, don't recognize this response. So I was kind of guessing.
Yeah,
I
I will
think I
work with
got
Meredith
there.
once she gets an answer from Ray.
Okay, that's great. I'm just glad to know you're working on it.
Chris, anything else?
No, we're hoping no more snow events for the year.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Very, very happy with my public works crew for the job well done.
Good. Yep. Anything from the council?
I'm still not giving kudos to Nick, though.
Yeah,
He was in Mexico for half.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just monitoring from a beach.
All right, no further
Remote.
business. Meeting stands adjourned.